Well, that was interesting. Kind of. Let's get started.
Another race for the world's greatest driver, Juan Manuel Fangio.
Former world champion Jim Clark leapt into the lead. That's Clark's Lotus going like a bomb.
And James Hunt is the world champion by just one single point.
By being a racing driver, you are under risk all the time. And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
And that is Michael Schumacher ahead, the world champion.
To become a four-time world champion, Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton, champion of the world.
That's for all the kids out there who dream the impossible.
Max Verstappen is champion of the world.
Oh my God! Max Verstappen, you are the world champion! The world champion!
Hello and welcome to episode 16 of F1 in Review 2023. I'm Tom Clabon and as ever I'm joined by Tristan Fancourt and Angus Gallager. Today we look back at the Spanish Grand Prix. Now for the third time in a row, Max Verstappen won the race this weekend, but it was 23 seconds or so behind him that was far more interesting, that being the Mercedes cars of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, finishing in P2 and 3, flexing the muscles of those new Imola upgrades, if you will, and an even more impressive finish for Mr. Russell, considering he started in P12. Now this means Mercedes are now second in the Constructors. Do they now have the car and the drivers to stay there?
Tom, do you want to just repeat that time between Lewis Hamilton in second and Verstappen just once more?
Oh, 23 seconds.
23 seconds.
2-3.
Yeah, and he stopped for an extra pit stop as well. Which is, I think he had 48 seconds, something crazy when he crossed that line. And so, before he's pitted. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely nuts, right, between number one and number two. That is bad. That's bad. So, yeah, can Mercedes hang on to that second place? I'm not sure. I'm not convinced yet. But clearly the drivers think that they've got something good going on, because what night and day in the attitudes from Lewis Hamilton and George Russell once they finished nearly half a minute behind Max Verstappen on Sunday, and they were saying that they think it's a good step in the right direction. They were asked why whether or not Mercedes should have put side pods on the car earlier. And I think Toto Wolff sort of summarised it the best, actually, and when he said that we kind of had to give it a go at the beginning and then see where that left us, which is fair enough, but clearly they've given up. This is something that I think we spoke about 8-9 episodes ago, how they were going to be putting side pods on, and here it is. And clearly they've made up an excellent chunk of time there. So the pressure is now on Aston Martin because they've dropped that second place. I mean, it's blooming typical, isn't it? Last week we're like, oh yeah, Aston Martin will hold on to it, and Lance Stroll's terrible. Lance Stroll has a great qualifying, and Mercedes overtake Aston Martin. So I don't know. It seems like everything we're saying is going to be wrong. McLaren are the worst team this year. Well, let's see if I can jinx that particular prediction. So yeah, I think it was absolutely great though to see them very, very competitive. And will they be able to catch up with first place now is the question. The answer to that is most certainly no. However, I can see a fantastic battle coming out now between Mercedes and Aston Martin. And maybe, Angus, this is the solution to Stroll being the puppy dog. Maybe, now that there is a realisation that they've lost that all-important second place, he's now going to grab the bull by the horns and take the fight to, well, maybe we could say the best driver pairing on the grid? Mercedes, do you think they've got that?
Quite possibly.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think, first of all, before I comment on Mercedes at any point, I'd just like to acknowledge some next-level sandbagging from Lewis Hamilton, who after practice on Friday said, I don't think we'll make the top 10 in qualifying. I think it's looking like a struggle. And then come Sunday, they're sitting there second and third on the podium. another double podium, which is more of a rarity for Mercedes in the last year or two, based on their drop in performance. But I think it's safe to say that if you discount Red Bull and the fact that Verstappen won with ease and that Perez came through from the midfield to finish fourth, if you discount them, that's a very strong result for Mercedes to be well clear of Aston Martin, to be well clear of a Ferrari, if we discount Charles Leclerc because he started well back, to be well clear of a Ferrari who started ahead of them by the Hamilton was 21.6 seconds ahead of Sainz by the finish. That's very encouraging for Mercedes on a track where the characteristics are more like the rest of the calendar, because you have the sort of high to medium speed corners, for example that last corner which has been reshaped from the chicane. You have the slower speed corners, a couple of hairpin turns on that track. After the start of the season, where before we went to Catalonia, we'd had four, arguably five if you include Australia, street circuits. So the characteristics of certain cars did not come out as much. That's especially true of the Mercedes, and it possibly, with hindsight, helped a team such as Aston Martin and maybe covered over some of their weaknesses. But yeah, very strong weekend for Mercedes. Aston Martin would be their direct rival, and they've now overtaken them in the Constructors' Championship simply because it's a weekend where Mercedes got 33 points, Aston Martin came away with only 14, which in the end was going to be enough to overhaul the deficit that was already there. Very encouraging for Mercedes. Can they maintain this? My gut would say yes, but I'm only saying that because the upgrades are working. If the upgrades had had a poor weekend, I probably would be sitting here right now and saying how it's not looking good for them, that they need to up their game. We've got another circuit coming up which it's more traditional than other street circuits, but Canada, Montreal still got street circuit characteristics at its core, so it's going to be difficult to tell. But after that, you've got a series of tracks: Austria, Silverstone, Budapest, Spa, Zandvoort, Monza. Those 6 sort of European races are all going to, I think, possibly show the strength of the Mercedes upgrades and how there's a possibility that they could maintain their strong showing from this weekend and keep it going. For Aston Martin, I think it shouldn't be concerned, right? Because they've already got like double the amount of points they had last year already after 7 races. So for them, this is already a phenomenal improvement. I think for them, it'll be a case of trying to sustain under pressure from Ferrari. If I look at the finishing order from this race, they were a good 40 seconds off the Mercedes. From 6th down to 12th on the final standings. There's 12 seconds covering them, and included in that is Aston Martin. You've got the Alpines there, you've got Zhou, you've got Leclerc coming through, and you've also got Yuki Tsunoda and Oscar Piastri, and Nyck de Vries didn't finish too far behind, albeit a lap down. So it's interesting how Aston Martin have slipped closer to the midfield, I'd say, rather than Mercedes. Does this mean they're in the midfield now? What do you think? Are they going to be in the midfield maybe the top of the midfield?
I would go as far to say I think the Constructors' Championship as is will pretty much finish as it is come the end of this season, because I think that the power that Mercedes have, the experience, everything there, the experience there of winning many World Championships for years to come and learning from their mistakes will put them in good kilter to usurp Aston Martin, who've done very well, stolen a march on many a team, but I think now we're starting to see that it's one thing to go and develop a good car at the start of the season, and another thing to keep on developing it and keeping up with the rest of the pack and moving with the times. And I fear, looking at this race in isolation, that maybe Aston Martin is starting to dip a bit in terms of their performance, not showing the quality they did at Saudi Arabia, for example, or Australia. So I think that, coupled with the inconsistency of the driver pairings as well, granted Stroll, credit where it's due, did a very good race this weekend, a strong finish, but arguably that needs to be more of a consistent showing. There needs to be more than just a patch or a series of races. Compare that to the Mercedes pairings of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, and I think that Lewis Hamilton's form has gone under the radar somewhat, really. He's got 2 second places, beating his teammate there, George Russell, after a sluggish season last year compared to his normal standards. I think he's one to watch come the end of this season. I don't think they'll be challenging Red Bull come the next few races, but maybe once again in Brazil, looking at Abu Dhabi, for example, the American Grand Prix, that could be when Mercedes come into their own and have a chance at least of winning a race, because couple of the Mercedes upgrades with the Red Bull penalties which are coming, maybe I'm an optimist, but that will perhaps draw the two teams closer together than the current gap we have here of nearly half a minute, but maybe that's a bit optimistic. But yes, I think the battle now for third is between Aston Martin and Ferrari, maybe even Alpine as well, because consistently they've been getting some good points, and that is what pays dividend, really, doesn't it, really? But yes, a strong showing for Mercedes, but premature to say they're back, as I've heard.
Yeah, it definitely is. You can't after, I think, one race. We'll evaluate it as it goes forward. And the other thing to note, I think, really, is it's taken a long time for Mercedes to get to this point, and this particular stepping stone has been stepped. They've made certainly an excellent push forward as they've, I don't want to say copied the most popular design or the best design, but they are bringing in the design cues from the other cars as we just sort of expect. And other manufacturers will be bringing their own upgrades. And if you specifically saw, the Ferrari have lost their sort of bathtub style side pods, and now have a smaller cutout. It looks more like a drain pipe. For some reason, whatever reason, they've progressed that forward. So what I mean is, Mercedes have only just got here, and if they're matching, and I'd say Aston Martin's performance, then how long till Aston Martin bring their own upgrades and optimise their performance further? And they've poached a lot of very good engineers from Red Bull, and that means that they do kind of have the expertise and the knowledge there to keep progressing the car forward. So this was a particularly odd track, I think. We had a lot of mix-ups, I think, perhaps, and that we weren't expecting throughout the weekend. And clearly this one, for whatever reason, just favoured Mercedes. And Aston Martin's excuse, if you want to know, was that they were suffering from a lot of degradation. And we know that Spain is a high degradation track. It's long, fast right-handers. It really does scrape away those tyres. And clearly they just couldn't optimise for the track conditions. But that cannot be applied to every single race. It would be really nice, wouldn't it, if Red Bull weren't able to optimise their car to a race at some point during this season. Now that Monaco's gone, I can't really think of one that they're going to struggle at. But hey, there we have it. But it would be great if we can ignore the first place. It would be fantastic if we had a bit like we had in 2021, which is two evenly matched cars head to head for that, well, whatever the top position is. In this case, it's kind of second because first has already gone. It'd be wonderful, wouldn't it, if we had Hamilton versus Alonso, the battle, the duel in the desert at the very end. So if you were coming away from Spain thinking, blimey, that was a bit dull, I'm going to switch off Formula One now forever because this is just pointless, then my suggestion is look at some of the other positions and pick one that you really want to see the fight for, because there was a lot of excitement going on. It just so happens that it's just not going to be in first place for a little while. I'm very excited to see Aston Martin versus Mercedes. It just sounds really cool, I think, that fight. If only McLaren were there too.
I think that go back to one of Tom's points about the penalties that Red Bull have as well. I think one factor of the season which may become more of a reality is that at some point it's the luxury a team can have when they are far enough ahead. Red Bull may get to a point midway through the season, they may already have got to a point where they think, right, we are far ahead, we can give or take scale back a bit of development this season and focus on a strong start for next season. So I think as a result of that, you may therefore get a close competition. You may get Red Bull pushing less because they think they got the championship wrapped up, which realistically will come to fruition, and Mercedes close in a bit more. On the other hand, you might get what happened last season where Ferrari, for example, got to kind of gave up and went, oh, forget this championship's over. Let's focus on the next season. That hasn't quite worked, has it? But it'll be interesting. Yeah, not at all. But it'll be interesting to see if either of those scenarios happen. I think it's definitely a possibility.
Mm-hmm. I think on that point, if you're Red Bull, the optimal or ideal scenario for yourselves is you win the championship by the summer and then essentially, as you say, turn all attention to next year, really. There's a question about whether they can do that in both championships. I think looking at the drivers, that's more likely than the constructors, owing to the fact that they can control the variables a bit more there, i.e. second place is Perez and third place is currently Alonso, but I'd hazard a guess saying Mr. Hamilton and maybe Mr. Russell will have a go at that one. Compare that with the Constructors' Championship, but of course you are one team versus another team. So, and obviously that is resulting in a lot more prize money as well. That is the most important championship. So I think that may be the plan. That's maybe why the upgrades that for themselves Red Bull is coming in at the moment in terms of the reliability and performance, hoping to go and just beef out that gap as much as possible, front load the upgrades if you will, and then ultimately allow the other teams to catch up a bit more towards the end of the season while they focus on next year and the penalties pay dividend. That's of course on the presumption that the penalty does affect them as such, because they've already been penalised in terms of the wind tunnel time, for example, in addition to the financial penalty, and then they are half a minute beyond anyone else, and there's nobody really at the moment breaking away from the pack to challenge them. It's between Aston Martin and Mercedes, as we say. So maybe blue sky thinking there, but it's nice to see a battle hotting up this season, because rewind a few races, I thought, well, here we go. It's going to be Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, the top three. But I think that era is now done and dusted, at least for this season. But maybe I'm just looking at this race and this circuit and result and going, this has got to be the season now, right? But interesting. Reasons to stay on, as you say, Tristan.
Absolutely. I mean, Red Bull are a second ahead, a second a lap, and that from Spain's sort of estimations, which, I think, although when you look at the big picture over 60 laps, it ends up being something like, 40, 50 seconds. But a second, we can make that up, and that gives me some hope. A second's not too bad. And there is always the possibility, because it's happened before, that a team makes a mistake. Red Bull will be trying to upgrade their car. They know that there is a little bit more they can push out of it. And with reduction in wind tunnel time, they may well be adding upgrades to the car that does not push it as far forward as they would like, and other teams catch up, and eventually that second turns into 8/10 and 6/10, and eventually you get the 2021 scenario. What we want really is it to happen really, really quickly, and unfortunately, that penalty, Tom, that you were outlining for Red Bull will not last forever. I kind of dread what's going to happen in 2025 when Red Bull should be back to full kilt, right? And without any issues. So I think now is the opportunity for everyone to really crack out those Etch-a-Sketches. Start taking as many pictures as they can. Perez can just lift the car and get the car lifted high up into the air yet again. Williams can start using computers to get their floor done, because my goodness, I don't know if you saw at the weekend the bottom of the Williams car. I mean, James Vowles said that he was surprised that Williams just weren't always using computer aids, and compare that to Mercedes and Red Bull. It's just absolutely nuts. So yeah, it'd be very, very good, right? If everyone can catch up a little bit, but they've only got a year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years by the time the effects of the penalty finally leave Red Bull to get the cars forward. But it's only a second. It's only a second, right? Second is a mere second.
It's difficult to say, I realise, looking into the future, and I suppose sort of presuming that things will carry on as they are. But do you think we're going to return back to a fight between Red Bull and Mercedes for the championships, be that the constructors or the drivers, or could we possibly have a three-way fight or something completely different?
Who knows? But Ferrari want something to say about it, don't they? And I don't know about you, Angus, but I think if Ferrari aren't in it in the next year, 2 years, I think they're going to have a problem in their hands with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, because we said about the problems last year and the tensions bubbling up, but I think that not only tension will bubble up, but maybe they could leave.
Yeah, I mean, can't lie, the Lewis Hamilton rumours we had from a couple of weeks ago, they've definitely died down. But yeah, you're right in saying that there's definitely a possibility that those drivers move on. I think you do have a scenario. It's one strength of the Formula One grid at the moment. You have a lot of talent on that grid. I think it's safe to say when you have drivers like Leclerc and Sainz at a team like Ferrari, even looking at Alpine with Ocon and Gasly, strong lineup there. Lando Norris at McLaren, someone like Alex Albon at Williams, just to cherry pick an example. There's lots of talent up and down the grid, not just filtered into those top teams. So, and then you got Stroll at Aston Martin. Sorry, that was really, I didn't have to say that, but a bit harsh, but I'll put it in there anyway. But the point being, you have scenarios where drivers like Leclerc and Sainz will want to be in those winning cars. But it's interesting because will they be able to get a place higher up the grid? Not necessarily. There may be a gap when Hamilton retires. When will he? Who knows when he will retire? To be honest, he could go on for a few years yet, like Alonso has managed to do. I guess Perez, if he ever stops being flavour of the month at Red Bull, there's a possibility of that. If he's ever been flavour of the month, might be a free seat there, but it's tricky. It's tricky. I say that these two did agree to multi-year contracts with Ferrari a few years ago, so they made their own bed. So they got a lie in it to at least the end of 2024. But yeah, they'll be possibly, looking at the current state of Ferrari, they'll be itching to get out of those contracts. They're just in a car which is just not delivering, and the fact that Charles Leclerc, after qualifying, what was the comment he said? He said, in any corners where you have to turn left, the car didn't really do that well. little bit concerning, that, because it's usually about 50-50 that. Have you a quick look at the track now in Spain? There is, I make it 5. Well, actually, it's not too bad. 5 corners where you turn left. It's quite a lot where it's not doing too well. Maybe explains why he came 19th in the running order, only ahead of Logan Sargent. So, yeah, I mean, and they've only scored points. Ferrari have only scored points with both cars in 4 out of 7 races, which is not good. And they've only been on the podium once in 7 races. That was Leclerc, who somehow took pole in Azerbaijan. That seems years ago, by the way, that pole position. But yeah, it's not ideal for Ferrari. I'm still waiting for this big reset that they were talking about. Admittedly, maybe I'm being too cynical too early, but yeah, they need to step it up, don't they? Or else they could lose their drivers at some point, because their drivers will be getting a bit tetchy and a little bit wondering what's going on.
Unfortunately, looking from the outside in, and we've alluded to this before, but I think it's worth saying again, they're falling back into the modus operandi of, well, we've always got next year. And that can only wash for so long, can't it, really, when you've got drivers like Leclerc, who's been going into that team at a young age, promised success, got a taste of it, a glimpse of it one season, and then the team self-imploded. So I think we need to go and see something from Ferrari soon. I'm not expecting them to be challenging Mercedes, toe-to-toe, if you will, pound for pound. I don't expect them really to be winning races, but I expect them to be there or thereabouts. And roughly speaking, aside from Sainz at the start of this race, where he did, let's be fair, challenge Verstappen off the start, granted he was on the better tyres, we didn't really see too much from Ferrari full stop, really. And I think that's quite concerning, because even in the days of 2021, for example, when they just sort of emerged out of that dreadful season in the COVID-inflicted years owing to that penalty they had, they were always there at qualifying and then were perhaps not there when it came to race pace, but getting decent points. But if you're not qualifying well, which seems to be their strength, then what do you have? Well, very little in the realms of Leclerc, for example.
Yeah, isn't it a shame that they didn't crack out the incredible qualifying when it mattered at Monaco, right? But that's the beauty of Monaco, isn't it? It makes everyone go to the next level of performance. Ferrari, you're right, were sort of nowhere. And it was a shame, because Sainz clearly at his home race was hoping for the best possible result, which in this case was second place, given the torpedo that is the Red Bull car. incredible speed, and he nearly had it. And then Ferrari sort of, I don't know, Ferrari'd him. It was a bit of a bizarre race for Ferrari. They just kept moving on backwards. Charles was not making any inroads either, and what's more, I just don't feel like they had the strategy. I mean, Leclerc started on the hards from the pit lane because he qualified in P19, and so he thought, well, we may as well change everything on the car as well, so he starts from the pits, and then he pits on lap 17. Leclerc should have been going into lap 30 maybe. It's crazy. So, and Leclerc was even surprised when he came onto the radio and he said, "Oh, right, so we're pitting." They're like, "Yes, we're pitting." And he's going, "Okay, all right, are you sure?" Are you sure? And it's the same with Sainz as well. Sainz, it feels like Ferrari say, "Hey, Sainz, hey, we're thinking about pitting you," and then Sainz like does the, "Are you sure? Have we thought about this?" And then they're kind of like, "Oh, well, maybe we consider it some more. Oh, yes, actually, we've decided we do want to pit." And it feels like the drivers don't trust the Ferrari strategists at the moment, which is incredibly damaging to Ferrari. And not in any way, Fred Vasseur's fault. I think it's still the same old problem. The problem that I think we've been shouting, hollering from the rooftops for the last 3 years, which is they need proper change in management structure all the way down. They've only been, they've been knocking off the heads of the team principals, right? And no one else. So they're just going to have the same thing over and over and over again. You can change the chef, but the knives are blunt. You're still not going to be able to cut very well.
So true. And talking about changes then, we can't leave this episode or conclude it without talking about the Spanish Grand Prix, the circuit itself, having a slightly different circuit layout. The chicane towards the very end of the lap was out and replaced by a sweeping left-hander. A welcome change, do you think, or maybe not?
Yeah, I think so overall. It was well received by the drivers. It's made the track a few seconds faster, which is, well, faster's not always a good thing, but on this occasion it seemed to be the case. It made the track more interesting. I think as well we saw actually a decent uptake in overtaking. I know that one of the criticisms, having done a bit of research, one of the criticisms of the last corner, when it used to be, so for context, it used to be flat out or near flat out, and then they brought in the chicane about 10-15 years ago to increase overtaking. And then at the time it was said, because the cars were those are some of the fastest F1 cars ever, and they didn't have overtaking in mind as much as the current generation of cars do. Those cars back in the late 2000s were some of the fastest ever. So therefore, it was nigh on impossible to follow a car through a corner, and you kind of just, the spectacle was kind of, you just accepted, you went, whoa, these cars are so fast, and you kind of accepted overtaking would be a little bit lower than other tracks. So they brought the chicane in to improve the racing, but that also meant that the actual track suffered. The chicane was very fiddly, didn't give much to the overtaking, and it was for years at a request that it was got rid of. And thankfully, I think it has been got rid of, because it was very fiddly. You had to brake down to like 50 miles an hour. The curbs are very bumpy, a bit like the old Singapore sling chicane, what they used to call it, the one where you'd literally go, what was it, left, right, left, bounce over the curves.
Bring it back.
So fiddly.
That's what I say.
And they replaced it with Singapore's a different one, because there's not really too many overtaking opportunities there, and they replaced it with just a smoother left-hander to make sure that the track felt better to drive. Nightmare for Charles Leclerc, a left-hander, but as any left-handed corner. But at the same time, I think the change definitely has been well received, and it's made the racing better. I saw noticeably there seems to be more overtakes than I remember in Spain for a while. So
yeah. Would you like to know how many there were?
Ooh. Go on.
There were 65 overtakes at this year's Spanish.
That seems like a lot.
Yeah,
That's
it is. It's the
roughly
most overtakes we've had in a very, very long time. Well, since 2013 to be precise, when there was 74 if you want more context, last year 48, 2021 51, in 2020 just 32.
Jeez. Jeez.
Yikes.
Glad I was out that day. Blimey. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's long overdue, basically, a change like that. But I think we can be a bit more ambitious. And what I mean by that is we can have a Madrid street circuit. We can have a more entertaining circuit than this, because I understand that it's good for research, testing, hence testing was here for many a time. But in terms of the spectacle, there's only one or two places really you can plausibly, as drivers did this weekend, overtake on. And call me old-fashioned, call me a man who wants to be entertained while watching Formula One. I like a bit more of chances to overtake in different parts of the circuit, really. So it's welcome, as I say, but if we're going to be a bit more ambitious, why not go for a brand new circuit in Madrid, which I hear isn't a done deal yet. There's still some question marks over that and whether that will happen. So maybe those who own this circuit here in Barcelona have done a very good case for saying to Formula One of the powers that be, keep us. There's more overtaking this year than ever before, and there'll be more next year. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But yeah, it was helpful, but no more than that, really.
Well, I thought it was very good. I think it was much, much needed for this Spanish Grand Prix. I think the Circuit de Catalunya is historically a very average track. Part of the issue is because they do testing there. And as a result, by the time the teams... Well, historically, they used to do testings there, I guess, because now they don't. But they used to do testings there. And that meant that by the time the team came to actually drive the circuit, they all knew how to perfectly set up the car. And so we had that element of everyone knowing that it was high degradation and how the tyres would react. Okay, so everyone's going to be on these start. Oh, right, so everyone's starting on the mediums and no one's going to get it wrong. And there was that element of predictability because we'd done testing. I still think that testing should be done at a completely different circuit. Something like Mugello would be a great circuit to do testing at. Just somewhere that they can get their name in there. Say that we're an F1 track. Maybe the reserve. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
And
now
then we don't have the predictability of a track that every team knows how to set the car up. And as a result of the changes, we saw over the last couple of years, because they also don't forget they also altered the final sector a bit 2 years ago, and these changes mean that cars can definitely follow closer, and in theory, way more chances of overtakes, which we definitely saw. And it felt like people were overtaking up and down the track. It was fantastic to see fights for P18. De Vries versus Bottas was fun, and all the way up to the fight for fourth place, and it was nice to see Perez with the opportunity to fight his way back through. Okay, granted, he shouldn't have been out of the back in the first place, but there's no getting away from the fact that Perez was able, because of the changes, to get up the field, and we shouldn't detract from that. So I know there was a few people on online and on Twitter and whatnot feeling like this was a bit of a snooze fest, but the issue is it's very uninteresting if you just look at the front yet again, and that's unfortunately just the sport we're in. I would like a Catalunya track to be paired with a Madrid street circuit. I think that'd be really good for Spain. I think it'd be really cool to have that. I think we should keep Barcelona now that they've changed these rules, but it'd be nice if we could have a very accessible track. And what's really nice about street tracks as opposed to the dedicated circuits is it's a little bit easier to get to them. If you've ever been to the Circuit de Catalunya, it's not actually in Barcelona. It's a bit of a way out, and you have to basically take the train there or a bus or something, and it's a little bit of a trek. Whereas a street circuit in Madrid would be really nice, because I feel like everyone could get to it. I could get to it really easily, stay in Madrid and walk down or whatever. So, yeah, I think that Spain has definitely shown that it can fix the track it's got, but I wouldn't be opposed to a second one going forward.
No, I think that's much needed as well, really, because while we've got many circuits in different continents, nearly all of them really, which is as it should be, I don't think we should forget how important Europe is to Formula One in terms of not only fans, but manufacturing as well, the birthplace of Formula One and Wentworth, really. And I think it's difficult when you hear talk of Spa being dropped for a South African Grand Prix, although I understand that talk of that is now cooled owing to the country's diplomatic and geopolitical relations with Russia. But yes, I think the idea of having 2 Grand Prix in one country that's not the US would be a great idea, really, because if I'm not mistaken, aside from Italy and the US, there's not one country that holds or has held 2 Grand Prix. Is that right?
Yeah, I think no one else.
But anyway, talking about this Grand Prix once again, only one in Spain, and one person who did rather well was Guan Yu Zhou, going from P13 to finishing in P9. Valuable points there for Alfa Romeo. Not somebody was spoken about too often because, if I may be so plainly speaking about him, not done too well this season, or dare I say the season gone by as well, but valuable points and proving some doubters wrong there, maybe.
Yes, and we haven't spoken to him about him very much, or we haven't spoken to him either, but we haven't spoken about him in much longer, and it's nice, isn't it? It's nice to be speaking about Zhou in a bit of a positive way, and he actually made an impact, and it was I think a lot of the focus is being on Valtteri Bottas, but it's very important for the Alfa Romeo brand and the Sauber brand as well underneath that to have a prominent Chinese driver at the moment that's doing very well, because for Audi, who's about to come into the sport and pair with Sauber, they've been doing a lot of work launching their F1 poster campaign in China, and it's felt a little bit like they've been bolstering that side of it up, and their premier Chinese driver has not been necessarily putting in the performances that we'd have liked to see. But I think there's no detracting from the fact that at the moment Zhou clearly is demonstrating why he has got that seat. And I think, Tom, earlier you said that Bottas was slowly morphing into Kimi Raikkonen, and maybe that's correct. Maybe the ties are changing. Bottas had held the sort of top spot of those 2 drivers for a while, and it's great to see that Zhou's sort of, maybe finding his feet just a little bit, which is going to be, as I say, incredibly important as Sauber tries to move forward in the constructor standings, especially as they now pair with Audi.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was really important for Zhou to get some more points under his belt. Credit to him where credit's due, though. He did of course score a P9 finish in Australia, so not his first points of the season. Scored points more often, i.e. in 2 races, to Valtteri Bottas' 1. So in that regard, he's doing better than him in terms of individual finishes, but is level on points with him. So not a lot of success for Alfa Romeo so far this season, but it's nice to see it's coming from both sides of the garage, if you will, because I think there were questions which I think were unfair, but were maybe morphing into some truth, that Zhou was not a pay driver, but was there because of the finances he brought to Formula One, because of the new markets he helped to open up over in China, for example, that had been not closed down, but diluted, dare I say, with COVID and everything going on there. So the fact he's able to go and put some good results in there and show everybody why he's worthy of a Formula One seat is important. But if I were to go and balance that out, I'd say to get a P9 in the manner that he did, i.e. getting a very, very lucky penalty to his advantage and being a bit, wimpish really to the stewards and going, he pushed me off onto tarmac with no damage and really didn't really turn into the corner, I think is not the best mode of practice. But credit where it's due, a P9 finish, and fingers crossed for Alfa Romeo, my former prediction of how they do the season. There's a bit more of this really, but there's still room for growth when it comes to him. He's 24 years old. I don't think he'll be somebody who's going to be challenging for world championships in his Formula One career, but a good driver really. And I think comparisons with someone like Mazepin is deeply unfair looking at this Grand Prix in isolation, and indeed in Australia as well. And to be fair, he's been quite even with Bottas when it comes to race finishes as well. Not a situation where you have Bottas, let's say, in P11, P12 and he's down in P18, P19. It's been both of them having a few highs, but unfortunately more lows so far.
So I take it that you disagree with the Tsunoda penalty.
I thought it was harsh. Yeah,
Really?
I don't think he. Yeah, I do. Yeah, because in terms of what I define as running a driver off the track, granted he wasn't between the white lines, but it was onto tarmac. He rejoined safely. No damage was done. No time was lost. If that was me, I'd be fuming at that personally.
Because I know Angus will disagree with me after this, so I'll get my 2 pence in and then
Yeah.
I disagree with the premise that I've seen a lot, which is that there was no damage done. No, he didn't push him off. Blah blah blah. And the reason for that is because if you look at what the penalty was given for, it was for pushing a driver off that was obviously and clearly alongside another car. And if you go back and watch the replay, Joe was actually ahead of Tsunoda in the apex of the corner, which by the steward's definition is the place in which the car must be alongside, significantly alongside or ahead, in this case ahead. And then Tsunoda drifts out. Yes, he had his steering lock pretty much fully on, but that's understeer for you, and pushes him off out over the white lines, which has a significant knock-on effect, determining whether or not he'd be eligible for another penalty, which is the after the black and white flag going outside of the racetrack boundaries. So when you say there's no harm done, well, actually there is harm done. Imagine if someone had pushed Verstappen off the track and he was in those last couple of laps, right, when he was on his last warning before a time penalty for going outside of track boundaries.
But nobody wasn't, though. I.e., it wasn't one of those, your final strike and they need to get sanctioned.
But that doesn't matter. The point is he would have lost a strike.
True, but I think it's more a racing incident. If we're dishing out penalties for that, then I don't want to say Formula One's gone soft, but it's gone very much clamped down on anything that's close to contact, really. So I think it was a bit harsh.
Yeah, but he was. My point is, he's ahead, and it was within the rules, and everyone signs up to the rules. So I don't know. I thought there was a lot of whinging about a penalty that was clear and obvious in my mind.
Tristan, I'm gonna have to disagree with you shockingly.
Disagree with my disagreement.
I think it wasn't a penalty. I think that it was the first instance that we saw of that on the TV screens of those two going into the corner that way. Joe was. It was a racing instant. He was not even really pushed off. He ended up going onto a tarmac runoff, rejoined the race. I think it was harsh personally. I think Tsunoda did have reason to be a little bit annoyed with more than annoyed, because it cost him 2 points. And who knows, come the end of the season, those could be critical to AlphaTauri in their titanic battle for 9th with Williams. They could have been 3 points clear of Williams, but yeah, I thought it was harsh personally. So, although whilst I agree with Tom, could you please just remind us what your prediction was about Alfa Romeo? Seeing as last year I had to constantly repeat my Alpine prediction, could you please remind us of your Alfa Romeo prediction?
That'd be a pleasure. P4 on the constructors, I believe I said.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. There we go. That is all.
It's on the record. Don't you worry.
If you aren't up to date with the latest constructor standings, they are currently in 8th.
But they're 92 points behind Ferrari, so you never know.
Hey, in fairness, they might be 92 points behind Ferrari, but Joe was ahead of Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari at the end of this race. Which, if you gave me a bingo card with that on it, I would not expecting to be ticked that one off.
Yes, that's fair. Yeah, with Zhou starting in 13th and Leclerc in 19th. I would actually say with this drive from Zhou, I think this was more impressive, simply because if we were to compare his 2 9th place finishes, Tom mentioned his other one being Australia early this season. That was a race littered with attrition. He benefited from Carlos Sainz's penalty, so he would have finished 10th. Anyway, if it weren't for the late race chaos, realistically, you'd have both the Alpines finishing ahead of him as well. So that race wasn't on for points, and he kind of slipped in and took advantage of carnage going on around him. This one, he's moved up from 13th to 9th. Yes, he's benefited from another penalty, but he's held his own between the 2 Alpines. He's fought off at least the other AlphaTauri, and the McLaren, which in the hands of Lando Norris at least shows strong pace. So I'd say that this is credit where credit's due. I think he's done a solid job for this one. He's managed to mix it. He's only 8 seconds off the Aston Martins, so I think it's a solid job from Joe. I think for him it's about building on this and carrying it forward, taking advantage. If we look at the intra-team battle as well, Valtteri Bottas had a bit of a stinker, realistically. Qualified 16th, finished 19th. Dropped off a little bit recently, he has. So Joe needs to capitalise and show this strong form and try and get more of those eye-catching results, such as this weekend.
And looking more generally, actually, at the Alfa Romeo performance, they are level on points with Haas, a team which I think we can all agree has made excellent strides forward since their disastrous 2021 season. Then they're level pegging on 8 points, and with Haas, the opportunities for points seeming to come almost every weekend now, even though they may not end up in the points. We have seen those glimmer of magic moments. Do you think Alfa Romeo have what it takes to challenge Haas? Given, I would say also, Haas have a very strong driver lineup. Do you think that there could be another battle brewing here for that coveted 7th place?
Yeah, I think the battle's on, and I think it could go either way, really, because Haas either seem to be up there in terms of their grid start position, or they don't really. But if we're going to go and compare that with Alfa Romeo, as you say there, I think the driver pairings of Haas is more in form than Alfa Romeo, and I say that because with someone like Valtteri Bottas not doing very well this season, the sheen of Leicester year has gone off him severely, I'd say. But there's still that driver who was at a team, at a constructors winning Mercedes for half a decade. And you can't really discount that. Having that experience, that quality, that ability to deliver under pressure can't be discounted. That being said, he's not turned it on so far, and it's all good to go and have talent on paper, but really the results tell on the end. The results are important in terms of points and so forth. So I think the battle is on. If I were to place a bet at the moment, it would be Haas, but I don't think they're going to pull away from Alfa Romeo. I think Alfa Romeo will come back into their own post the summer. I think previously last season, for example, they peaked in the first half, then dramatically fell away in the second half, that being Alfa Romeo. I can see something similar happening this season, just this one being the other way around versus last season, really. But do we agree or not?
Well, it'd be interesting if it happened, because that would be a role reversal of Alfa Romeo's season last year, wouldn't it? Because last year they started off, came out the blocks flying, were quicker than Mercedes. I remember all the jokes about Bottas out qualifying Hamilton because he joined Alfa Romeo after leaving Mercedes. And then second half of the season they got like 1 point in 11 races or something like that. It kind of went very much downhill. Do I see them beating Haas or AlphaTauri? I think AlphaTauri, yes, they will beat AlphaTauri. There's the caveat possibly of De Vries getting more into the swing of things as the season goes on. Well, if he's allowed to, if you believe reports from a few weeks ago. Canada's his last race in F1, so we'll see about that, because it will be the end of the 3-race ultimatum he was given. But I think AlphaTauri they should beat. Haas, if we're looking a little bit further ahead, or 0 points ahead because they're level on points, I think that depends on how Hülkenberg and Magnussen carry on. Hülkenberg had a strong qualifying, didn't he? In Spain, 8th, became 7th after Gasly's penalty, but then slipped off the radar, down to 15th in the race. Not much happened. Magnussen as well, low down. 7th could be on for them, to be fair. Could be profitable. Could end up being a profitable campaign later on, towards the middle and the end.
Yeah, I think so. It's always a balancing act, though, with these things. Learning for next year and trying to progress this year. And you have to be fair to Bottas in that he has been very unlucky with damage. And in fact, his slow performance this weekend was put down to damage as well. They said his underfloor was significantly damaged as a result of just, unfortunate race start. And it's moments like that kind of ruin it for these lower down teams. Unfortunately, when you are talking about 3 points a weekend, if you have a bit of damage and you slip down to P11, then that's absolutely devastating, and that's the difference between incredible success and not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I would like to say, though, I think that Haas is actually going to keep P7. I don't think Alfa Romeo can necessarily catch or keep where they are right now. I think Haas has got the backing behind it. Supposedly, by the way, in a turn of weirdness, Alfa Romeo is going to be pairing with Haas as Sauber, which currently are the underlying team underneath the title sponsor of Alfa Romeo, right? So they're going to be back to Sauber once Alfa Romeo leave, and Audi is coming in, so it will be Audi, right? But Sauber will still always be there as the engineering firm, the actual underlying team, the manufacturer underneath that. And so Alfa Romeo is going to go supposedly to Haas, bringing them a whole load of money and sponsorship, which would be excellent, I think. So Alfa Romeo could be fighting, fighting with its future team. But I don't think at the moment the Alfa Romeo team, as it currently is, paired with Sauber, has got what it takes to beat Haas. I think Haas has actually finally got the wind in its sails with enough money behind it, enough engineering prowess. I think, as sad as it kind of sounds, I think actually Alfa Romeo are going to stay in 8th place, which is a bit of a shame, I think, for Bottas, didn't you? Because I feel like what he deserves is an incredible few seasons as he enters the twilight years of his racing career. It feels like ever such a long time ago now that we look to the opening races of last year and the Alfa Romeo matching and beating the Mercedes pace. That was a crazy time ago, but hey, that's how much things can change in just 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely. And credit where credit's due when it comes to Haas. I think the decision to get Hülkenberg in so far is actually paying dividend because he's being quite consistent, as is Magnussen really, and that is so important in the sort of lower quartile or so of the Constructors' Championship, because consistency pays dividend. Getting that 10th place, 9th place, 8th, 7th, whatever, those small points consistently can really make a huge difference. And if you look at Alfa Romeo, look at AlphaTauri, look at Williams, they don't have a consistent driver pairing in my view, because yes, Joe scored points this weekend, congratulations to him, but prior to that they're few and far between. De Vries is yet to get going. I'd say as well Tsunoda is not necessarily up there with Magnussen and Hülkenberg in terms of quality, not up there with Bottas either, and Williams are nurturing in a rookie alongside Alex Albon. So I'd say 7th is where they deserve to be in the pecking order, to be honest, and I can imagine that being quite an interesting conversation between the employees or the employers and employees of Haas and Alfa Romeo, and they team up, because yeah, I mean, competing against your future employer and vice versa really would be quite interesting. But good to see on that point, actually, if those rumours do prove to be true, that Haas are able to go and solidify themselves as a independent team. Because dare I say, if they become Haas Alfa Romeo versus Haas Ferrari, does that make them a more of a standalone team than, let's say, Haas Ferrari? Are they more akin to Williams? Fingers crossed, because I think the culture of B and C teams it's good in some way for young drivers in terms of a progression and ladders and the ability to climb through Formula 1 without just jumping from Formula 2 to Formula 1 or getting lucky or paying your way, etc. But I do miss the era of independent teams all vying for the same thing and not the political nature of it. So if that's true, if there is a bit of a severance, if you will, with the bigger team of Ferrari, then part of me is looking forward to that, really. And on that forwards-looking bombshell, if you will, that's all we got time for in terms of episode 16 of F1 in Review 2023. Thank you very much for tuning in all the way to the end of this one, be that on your preferred podcast provider or elsewhere. However you listen, thank you very much. A reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and TikTok, our handle being F1 in Review, and we will be back as ever next week. Unfortunately, there'll be no Grand Prix action, but we will be looking forward to the Canadian Grand Prix, being the next one on the calendar. But to go and bridge the gap between the Spanish Grand Prix, looking back at that and looking forward as well to the upcoming new edition of this season, we'll be talking about Lance Stroll, how he's done in Spain, hinted at the good performance there, and Williams as well. Talked about Logan Sargent there. How is he and Alex Albon doing so far this season? We'll discuss that more, and no doubt a raft of news that will come through, rumours and the like between now and then. But thank you very much for listening, and we will be back next week to talk about all that and a lot more.